I know that Paul has already started the recording. Brenda, we have a quorum. Have you had a chance to take attendance? I don't know that we need to do a roll call, but
I have taken attendance, yes.
great. Well, then I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the December 1st, 2022 Metropolitan Policy Committee. Are there any changes to the minutes or requests, motions for any changes to the minutes?
I read the minutes and I noticed something on there that wasn't normal to me. And I suddenly realized we did meet at 9 o'clock on that day. It was a special meeting. So I was going to say the time was wrong, but it's correct. So that's it. Other than that, I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any opposition to the approval? I'm seeing none. Let's record that as unanimous. And then we're on to item 4 already. Actually, we've done part of that already. Is there any members that have announcements for the committee? That's MPC members. I'm not seeing any. Move on to agenda item 5. Comments from the audience. Paul, do we have anyone wanting to speak?
At this time, I would ask any attendees or members from the audience to raise their virtual hand if they wish to speak, but in looking at the attendee list, I don't believe so, because all the other attendees are staff.
Okay, very good. On to item 6, Metropolitan Planning Organization MPO issues. The first one is Oregon Household Activity Survey, and it looks like Kelly Clark is the lead. And Joe Broach and Kelly are the presenters.
Hi there. I just realized my my video isn't working for some reason. I'll try to fix that, but can you hear me?
We can hear you well.
Okay. My apologies on the video. Joe and I are here to present on the Oregon Household Activity Survey, or OHAS, as we'll refer to it, and hopefully my screen shows this. This is a statewide partnership, including all of the state's MPOs and ODOT, and Joe and I represent the project's leadership team. And I'll let him introduce himself and his role in this project as I'm getting the video up.
Sure. Thanks, Kelly, and thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. I am Joe Broach. I'm a senior researcher and modeler at Portland Metro, also a researcher at Portland State University, and I am the Travel Survey Subcommittee Chair, part of the leadership team for OHAS. And yeah, we're going to get you up to date on where we are with what I think is a really exciting round of the survey.
And I'm not seeing the presentation on my screen.
We can see it.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay.
At least I can.
Yep.
I think I heard some head nods, so that's good. So this is an exciting project because it's hopefully a model for future similar statewide efforts as we're able to leverage our respective agencies' expertise to deliver this big of a project. I'd like to start off just giving some background on why this is such an important project for us. So the data collected through this survey effort is really foundational because it provides real-world travel behavior data, and it's intended to improve the accuracy and confidence in our travel model forecasts, which really are the basis for most of our public policy and investment decisions, and it's really integral to our big planning efforts like the Regional Transportation Plan. It's an essential building block for travel models and other analytical tools as well. It provides details about travel behavior that is lacking in other data sources like big data or kind of the pings we get from our cell phones, that type of thing. We traditionally conducted a statewide travel survey about every 10 years. Oregon's last was in 2008 to 2011 during that timeframe, so we're due for another one. This survey will reflect a lot of change from that time. So a lot of growth, a lot of emerging technologies, and a lot of changes in travel behavior. And it really is designed to reflect the uniqueness of each of our metro areas in Oregon, and then to feed that unique data into our travel models to ensure that they reflect the distinct travel behaviors of residents in our areas. And the owner of this project is the Oregon Modeling Statewide Collaborative. And we recently rebranded this collaborative to that name because it really truly is a collaborative, and we'll need to leverage our collective strengths and experiences to develop the analytical tools from now on needed to respond to planning requirements and policy questions that we are being asked. The travel survey subcommittee is a subcommittee of the collaborative and is tasked with delivering this survey. Members include all of the MPOs, ODOT, the Federal Highway Administration, the Oregon Health Authority, Portland State University, and the Oregon Housing and Community Services, and then TriMet, the transit service in the metro area. And the consultant we have on contract to deliver this project is RSG, and they are a leader in the field of large household behavior survey and have been really excellent to work with so far. They have 3 subs working on various roles and playing various roles in this project. And of note is the Multicultural Collaborative, who is tasked with helping with public engagement and really mostly to help us apply an equity lens to our work. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Joe. And Joe, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Sounds great. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, great setup for this. And as Kelly mentioned, I mean, the primary need for the statewide travel survey is that it's the foundational data set for all of the regional and statewide travel demand modeling. That's its core purpose. But so it covers the basics. It allows us to update our models and understand what's changed. As Kelly said, it's been about a 10-year interval since the last one, a little bit more. We know a lot has changed, but even in normal times, people's behaviors and travel patterns change quite a bit. New modes are introduced, new modes have become more or less popular. Hopefully the impact of our policies starts to be noticeable around. So that's its core purpose. But, as I'm sure a lot of you know, it also supports many of our policy support needs, including RTP, MTIP updates that a lot of us are in the middle of right now, and sort of letting us compare to the past with traditional estimates that we've been taking regularly over time to understand how those patterns are changing, but also help us plan for the future and be sure that our policies are capturing the ways that people are traveling or aren't traveling. And so if we go to the next slide. And so Kelly made an important point, and I think it's worth repeating that, yes, things are changing a lot, but it hasn't diminished the importance of actually getting out there and talking to households about how they travel. Yes, there are new data sources, and I sometimes hear the question from people that aren't quite as engaged in this sort of work of don't we have big data sources now and enough traffic counts and cell phone data to just capture this behavior? Why are we still doing what feels like a pretty old technique to get data? And I think the answer is that those big data sources and traffic counts are good at capturing the where and the when of people's travel, but they don't tell us the who and the why, and who's traveling and why they're doing it are I would argue much closer to our policy decisions and plans. And so that's where the travel survey comes in. We get detailed information about who is traveling from households, people, their vehicle mix within the household, and then why they're traveling, what's the purpose of that trip that's passing by a traffic counter or recording a GPS trace on their phone. And then we're able to tweak the survey over time to capture data as it becomes important. We just missed the Uber and Lyft sort of take off with the last survey. This time we'll be adding questions to capture that separately from traditional taxi cabs. We'll be capturing more on EVs and hybrid vehicles, as well as shifts in working from home and online shopping that might also be impacting travel behavior. We can go to the next slide. Let's see. Where are we? Okay. And you all know that just a single travel day can be extremely complicated, and you can kind of think of this, if you follow the day from home, you're maybe dropping a kid off to school, you're stopping to get a cup of coffee, you go to work, you make some trips from your office to other places during the day, and then maybe you make a stop on the way home to pick up kids, go by the drugstore and get back home. That's a really complicated trip pattern, and you can kind of imagine, you're passing by and maybe your vehicle or your bicycle or your transit trip is being counted, but there's way more detail here that we want to be able to capture to formulate effective policy around it. And that was, this question of how to better capture these travel patterns. It was our driving motivation for designing this, what it really honestly is the next generation of OHAS that's kicking off with this round. I'm going to go to the next slide. So where we are in the process, phases 1 and 2 were in some ways even a bigger lift this time than in past versions, where we were mainly just tweaking an existing survey technique where people kept essentially paper travel diaries of what they did on one day. And this is a big shift. I'll talk a little more about the technology of this survey, but that meant that that scoping this, picking the right partner, and getting the survey design right was particularly important. And I think we put in a lot of our work up front. I mean, anytime you're doing something new and with new technology, it's good to have a partner who's sort of been there and done that before. And that definitely describes RSG. They've been collecting sort of state-of-the-art travel data via smartphones and other sources for longer than anyone else in the field, to be honest. And so they've been a great partner for kind of coaching us through how we can get the most out of the new data collection techniques and technology. So that was phase 1. We scoped it out, we put it out for RFP, we selected them, and now we are we finalized the survey design, or at least we're 99% of the way there, and we're just about to move into the implementation phase of actually collecting this data from households. And we can go to the next now. So as I mentioned, the evolution has been, it was kind of a long time coming as the technology caught up and became reliable and widespread enough to capture a representative sample. But it's, from what we've heard from other agencies and those collecting data, it's time to make the leap, and we're doing that. So it's going to be a majority smartphone-based data collection. A part of the reason we're doing that is to be able to collect more data passively. So rather than having to fill out a line for every single thing that you do, a lot of that information will just be captured and you'll be asked to check it, right? So did you just take a driving trip sort of thing, and then asking about why you did it. So that being able to leverage that will allow us hopefully to spin up interim surveys more often, so that we don't get caught as flat-footed in those tenure, in those tenured periods. Some new technology comes on, something happens that really changes people's travel patterns. We can get back in the field more easily, and that's what we're hoping to do with some recurrent surveys. The other thing that's changing, not just the technology, but a realization that we've got to do better at getting all Oregonians to participate in the surveys. There have been specific groups, particularly those who are historically disadvantaged populations, that have not participated at their representative levels in the past, and we're going to work hard to get them in. The other group that's been harder and harder to reach are those who are young. I think the smartphones help with that somewhat, that collection standard, but we're going to work hard to get everyone's voice in the survey. Data privacy becomes a new and growing issue as we're capturing more detailed data. It's great to have, but it also raises concerns that we want to be sure are addressed, so that we can have a strong commitment to people's privacy if they're participating in the survey. And as I said, we're continually evolving our questionnaire, capturing what we've captured before, but also trying to catch the current and near future trends and behaviors. We can go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, it's going to be primarily smartphone based. Don't worry, we're providing options for folks who either don't have access or don't feel comfortable using their smartphone to participate. There will be web survey versions and also even call-in options to make sure that everyone is included. But the real advantage here is that passive data collection. Rather than just knowing A and B, we'll know the path taken in between. That's becoming increasingly important as we think about things like tolling and diversion, to understand people's actual paths as they travel around, rather than just start and end points. It'll also give us more accurate estimates of things like travel times. The other big change, and I think this is going to be really impactful, is that with the smartphones, instead of the single day collection, which we've always done in the past, 1 weekday per household, we're going to be able to get full weeks from household, including weekends, so we can understand those day-to-day changes and weekday differences. It's also going to just give us a higher volume of data, better ability to capture those trips that might be you bike to work 1 or 2 days a week. That's likely to be missed under the old methodology. Now we'll capture that. Same for these emerging modes like Uber and Lyft and some of the other micromobility options out there. So we can go to the next slide and just kind of show you, we're zooming back out here of how this is going to happen. The recruitment is still going to be majority that our traditional methodology, the address-based sampling. So people are going to get a physical invitation in the mail to their house, and we and the consultants have found that this is still the best way to get people's attention. It seems more official. It's very hard to reach people by phone these days, and it also allows us to test the representativeness of our sample if we know who we've invited and we know who has chosen to participate. So you can see the data collection. This is a ballpark. This is our estimation. We're hoping to get around 3/4 or so to use the smartphone, so we can get that full week and the full data set. But there are web and call center options. The call center, you'll just call in your trips, and the person on the other end of the line will enter it into the database directly. Those will only be 1 day of collection, just because of the extra burden that placed on the household and the extra cost. But we're still going to keep the continuity with the old survey. So we're still going to have that representative travel day, regardless of the way that you chose to participate in the survey, phone, web, or call center. All of those will be weighted in a way that allows us to use the full data set for things like typical vehicle miles traveled on a weekday, or mode splits, or the other things that we're interested in. So we think in a way RSG has helped us kind of craft what we think is the best of both worlds there, for keeping our continuity, but also leveraging these new technologies for collection. We can go to the next slide. The other point I hit on earlier is that we're really focused on doing a better job of reaching those hard to reach populations, so that we understand our data reflects how all of the different various groups in Oregon are traveling, and so that our policies can then respond to those travel needs and realities. And you can see some of the groups here that we're in the past have had trouble reaching with the travel survey, and we're going to address that in several ways. And I think the next slide will start to speak to that. So the first and arguably maybe the most important is getting out in front of this, and rather than waiting until the survey responses are rolling in and realizing, oh man, we're low in response on these groups, we're getting out in front of it by reaching out before the survey happens to community-based organizations around the state in the various regions, those that represent these underrepresented communities. And we really want to communicate to them the importance of the survey, because a lot of their, a lot of the people that they represent are going to get these in the mail, and they're going to ask questions about them to people, the folks that they trust. And we want those folks to be knowledgeable and say, yeah, this is really important, and we can support you in participating in this. They really want your voice to be heard. And I think coming from them is going to be a lot stronger than some words we put in a letter, though we're trying that too. In addition to that outreach, we're trying a new, some tweaks to our sampling approach. So we aim overall at getting about 1% of households in the state, and then within each region a similar number. But we're kind of partitioning the state up into 3 types of areas: so urban, suburban, rural. And within each of those, we're going to have focus areas where we know from past experience, based on the demographics, that our response rate is going to be lower. We're going to send more mail invitations to those areas and fewer to the ones where we expect the response rate to be higher from our past experience and from our consultant partners' experience. So we're hoping that will help. And I'll talk about the phasing of the survey and how that plays into this too in just a moment. We're also, in addition to the address-based sample, we're gonna fill in maybe up to 20% of the sample with kind of direct outreach through transit agencies, through universities, and other partner groups to again try to reach some of the groups that are less likely to respond to something in the mail or even be reachable by mail. We're also going to test some differential incentives. We're going to have some members of underrepresented groups participate in focus groups and online bulletin boards to give us some ideas about what would entice them to participate. So we might offer differential incentives to get those groups in, tweak the materials, translate into additional languages, as point 4 there says, if we need to. We're already doing, we're committed to English and Spanish, but additional languages are possible if we hear from that. And so we're really trying to get out front of this, and we're hopeful that this will really close the gap. But we do have some other options if we don't quite get there. Next slide. So we don't have to dwell on this one. That this is where we did our legwork up front, I think. And the way we did this is that our RSG has already developed really strict protocols that follow national and international standards on the collection and transmission of this smartphone and web-based data, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel and come up with our own privacy protocols for this technology. But it's something that we're very cognizant of, and we're learning from RSG, but they're also very open to our ideas about how to make sure this is handled in the best way possible. And the next slide will get us into so with the survey branding is sort of out there. You may hear this, so it's good to be aware of it. It is being branded the Oregon Travel Study, and there's a companion, our Portland neighbors to the north in Clark County, the Clark County Travel Study. It's happening in parallel. We'll still refer to it as OHAS, but this is the branding that's going out. There's going to be a nice website. In fact, it's already up, OregonTravelStudy.com, with this nice frequently asked questions that will be updated and again translated, and all the basics for how to participate in the survey. I think it's looking really good. Next slide. So the timeline, and I was mentioning the kind of the sample size that we're hoping to reach. So we're hoping to get over 20,000 households to complete. Many of those, like I said, for a full week. And it's going to be kicking off here in spring of 2023. We're going to do what we're terming an expanded pilot, but really it's going to be the full deal and will be included in the final data set. We decided to keep the past tradition of splitting the data collection. So we're going to be in the field spring 2023. We're going to learn what we can about response rates and what worked and what didn't in terms of incentive structures and targeting specific groups. And then we're going to go back with that information in fall 2023 and finish up in spring 2024 And between each of those, we'll be able to kind of tweak our sampling strategy to try to target groups that we're seeing that are not participating at our expected levels. We're already very confident in the technology. We did an internal test of that last summer, but this is more about making sure that we're getting the right people to participate. And so we expect then the final data delivery to be available sometime around summer, fall of 2024. So mark your calendars. It'll be it'll be the largest OHAS data set ever. I can almost guarantee that, and it's going to be really really exciting to start to dig into some of these travel changes. We know anecdotally, but we don't have the numbers for. Next slide. And this is where I get to give special thanks to Kelly and LCOG. The way this is structured, thanks to their willingness to do it, is LCOG is serving as the primary budget and contracting authority, and then the rest of us MPOs are just coordinating with them, and it really does simplify the process, although it's been a lot of work to get this contract in place. Excited that we can announce that we've gotten all of the intergovernmental agreements in place. Everything is signed, and we've gotten the notice to proceed from ODOT with phase 3, and it's been a big ask of everyone, and we're excited to be moving forward with this. And I think with that, Kelly, we're at the point for any questions from the group, and hopefully that got you a little up to speed. A lot has happened and a lot is still to come, but we're really excited about this new addition. Kelly, anything to add, please do.
I don't. Thank you so much, Joe.
Okay, well, we appreciate the presentation. At this point, I'm asking for questions or comments from MPC members.
I do.
Councillor Moe.
The budget you just presented, $8 million, is that for statewide or a local study?
If I may, collectively, each of the Oregon's 8 MPOs contributed $1,754,000, and that was each of us kind of looking at what our representative population size is and proportionally contributing that amount. And then ODOT graciously is contributing $4 million, which is kind of above and beyond what we expected them to and what they had contributed last time.
And the study area is exactly what? Right
the
now?
Urban areas, so all of the MPOs. And then
in the state.
Yep, so each of the state's 8 MPOs will have our own little kind of micro area, and then the state as a whole is the full study area.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Mayor Van Gordon.
Thanks for the survey. So just a couple of questions. And maybe I missed this, how do people get into the survey? Right? Are we inviting them to apply, or when it's open, anybody can sign up?
No, it will be, the sampling is strategic. So it's going to be a random address-based sample for the bulk of the survey. So people will be randomly selected, and they'll get something in the mail, and then they can choose to participate. It won't be open to everyone. And that's so that we can understand participation rates and then weight the sample to be representative of people within MPOs and then statewide. That'll be 80-ish% of it. There will be some targeted oversampling that we're doing of specific groups like university students that are hard to reach by mail, transit users that are really important for modeling and sometimes more difficult to reach as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I would assume with the MPOs, right, there's a target sample size for each MPO, right? Like
that's correct.
So yeah, and then once we have the survey, we'll actually sort of see hey, we looked for 10,000 people from Lane, we got 9,000 people, and here's what we did.
And that's another thing that we'll be able to tweak, between those rounds of collection. We're trying to hit targets, you're exactly right, within geographic areas as well as sociodemographically. So if we see we're low in Eugene Springfield, then we'll send additional mailings to there in the following phase. Yeah.
And this is everybody's sort of core travel data set. So the MPO uses it, all the MPOs use it, and ODOT uses it.
That's correct. Yeah, this is the one. It's great that we have the coordinated process here. Not every state does, but it really helps that we're all working from this standard data set. It really increases the value.
How does this influence the climate friendly rules that are coming out of Land and Conservation Department?
It's a good question, Kelly. I don't know if you're probably closer to that than I am.
I don't know if there's not a direct tie, but there might be once the data is integrated into the travel models for us to be able to analyze some of the requirements around the climate friendly equitable communities a little bit better and be a little bit more nuanced.
All right. So
if I may share, this is Becky Knudsen from the ODOT side. The modeling in Oregon is moving towards a more complex platform that better simulates human behavior in travel. But it's a more complex tool that's more demanding in terms of data. And so we have an opportunity here to design data collection that meets the needs of these upcoming sophisticated models, so you can get answers to more sophisticated questions, such as the new climate mandates. It's going to be so dependent upon knowing what people are doing. We can't do it without this data set.
So right now, I'm fine with the data set. I think I have more questions about how all this sort of ties together. But right now, right, we don't have, what I'm hearing you say is we don't have the models that exist today and the data set that exists today to do the other part of it. Is that fair?
We do have models that can work on it, but they're not going to be able to do as good of a job as we would like them to do. Okay. So we're always looking ahead, and it takes a lot of time to develop a new platform. But the timing is just perfect for us, really. Once we figure out what that new rule really means to us on the planning side, we should have the tools that will help us do a good job.
Well, let us know as soon as you figure out what it means, because I think everybody is trying to figure that piece out too. All joking aside, I think there's the other, I guess, question that I have from an ODOT perspective, and I love models and I love surveys with the best of them, is just trying to pull up and get an answer to transportation's getting more complex, right? We're putting more data into it. We're updating a bunch of these models that as policymakers, we have no idea what's behind, how the sausage is made. And what I would love to do is get the high level, where is ODOT actually going with this, right? So we understand how we're taking a survey, but it's going to get fed into a machine that we're going to make policy decisions off of the next 10 years. And I'm not sure that I understand is ODOT sort of using the same theory of doing business, or are they sort of moving forward, or they have some sort of strategy or other play here, that's going on, if that makes sense.
So ODOT's in the same place you are. We don't know what we're supposed to do. We don't know what DLCD means when they say one thing versus another. And so we have two brand new FTE positions. One is a modeler on my end, and then my transportation planning analysis unit is within the planning section. So there's a new planner, and it's their job to figure this out with DLCD over the next year. And then once we understand what DLCD expects from all of us, we're going to develop guidance with them so that we know how to use these tools and do things the way they want us to. So we really are in the same boat you are. We don't know. And then there's also the equity side. We've been talking about equity for a long time, and no one's actually defined it or said what it means in terms of information they want from the analytics side. And so that's part of it too.
Yeah, and I'm going to hop off my bandwagon here, and because I could, kind of poke at this one for about the next 3 hours. I guess I would just encourage you from the ODOT side, right, is to just get some clarity, because it feels like a black box to to the rest of us about where and how where this actually is going and how ODOT's sort of changing and breathing with the needs of the state, because I'm not sure we all understand it. So,
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up. Actually, I have something I wanted to ask too along those lines. I'm assuming from what you said that LCDC has not reached out specifically to ODOT, which is kind of a major portion of our transportation system. But is that correct?
They have reached out, but they're not providing the information we need. So we've tried asking in different ways. So it's going to take like a team of people to work through so they understand why we're asking and what we're really asking and needs. It's just a new field for everybody.
Okay, well, thank you. And hopefully as MPC moves forward, we can maybe collectively try to address this. Paul, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add a couple of quick comments. One on the cost sharing, just so you're aware, you saw the roughly 1.75 million coming from the 8 MPOs, and our share of that currently is about $307,000 that we have programmed many years ago. I think, gosh, it may have been 4 years ago that we originally set aside some money for this. So just so you're aware, that's our cost for our proportional share of this survey is about $300,000. Second thing I want to add real quick is, Mayor Van Gordon, you talked about the data going into a black box or a model, and it's a little more complex than that because there are multiple black boxes. Central Lane MPO, we have our own model that we run. Metro has their own model. ODOT has the statewide model, and they model for some of the smaller MPOs using their resources. One of the reasons, as was mentioned, that it's very fortunate that we're all using the data set is to help to have some consistency across those models. But again, even for instance, when ODOT needs specific information for the Eugene Springfield area, they rely on our model more than their own model. So it's complex.
Thank you, Paul. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you very much, and excuse my voice. So what I got out of the answers to Mayor Van Gordon's questions were, we don't know what we're doing, so we're hiring more people to figure it out. Maybe I heard that incorrectly, but that's what I heard. And then it just seems to me, government at its finest, that the only winners in not knowing what we're doing are staff of agencies that gear up to figure out what we're doing. And forgive me for the directness of my perception, but that's just what I'm hearing. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially as we're entering into a phase where we know Oregon's growing. We know more people are using the roads. We know the roads are getting more congested. And as elected officials, which I get to join you being for another month, I think we just need to be as accountable as we can be to the general public. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Any other questions or comments? John.
Just a quick question on the sampling. It's based, I believe it said it was random based sampling on addresses. So how are the underrepresented communities going to be sampled, or how do you get equity from that if you don't know? It's totally random on your survey by address.
Well, it's not totally random. It will be stratified because we know from census data sort of generally who lives where. And we're going to divide that up into specific types of area that we're going to sample at slightly different rates. And so those are the urban, suburban, rural, and then within those that have higher or lower proportions of the types of populations that have been hard to reach. So we will send more mail to areas. We, of course, like you say, we don't know the specific households, but with areas with greater concentration with those groups that we think will respond at lower rates. So we are accounting that to some degree. But in the end, whether or not your household is in, there might be a higher or lower chance, but it's still random, and we sort of know the odds of how whether you got mail or not.
Also, would in the responses, would they carry more weight? In other words, would certain area communities carry more weight in the responses? So it's not total just by number, but it's by, you set some sort of, if I give a response from an elderly group, they have a certain amount of, okay, I see by
Yeah,
nodding.
you nailed it. That's exactly what we do. I mean, the data set is, it's available unweighted, but then part of the consultant's job, and it's a tough one statistically, honestly, is creating those weights. But this work we're doing up front, what you want to do is minimize that weighting to the extent you can. Ideally, you would get a representative group to respond to the survey. We never do exactly, and so that's where the weighting comes in. We would, yes, the type of person who's from a group that responded at lower rates than than their share of the population, then they would get a higher weight. Their voice would carry for more people than someone who's oversampled, some group that responds at more often than you would expect. So that's spot on. Probably explained it better than I can. Thank you.
And finally, you mentioned the fact that you're using cell phones to collect your data, because that way you can get the young people more involved. Whereas, I hate to say, older people like me would be more or less be reluctant to be involved. So.
It's not just to get the youth involved. It's also just for the the amount and quality of data we can get. But that's exactly why we're maintaining these parallel options, that you can participate via the web if that works. If that even doesn't work for you, you can pick up the phone and call in your travel, and it'll be entered in. So yeah, I think those rates are what they're seeing. 75 to even up to 80% are choosing to participate by smartphone now, but there's definitely still a group that's important to reach that's not doesn't want to do that yet, frankly.
I have one more. Geographically, when we look at, you say you look at the MPOs and individual MPOs, but in a lot of cases, especially here in Coburg, we outlying areas impact our transportation needs and requirements. So I don't know if that data could be used in some manner to be looking at the influx of people that are driving or transportation needs coming from outlying areas into say into Eugene or wherever.
Yeah, and that's another great advantage of doing this collecting this data all at the same time and in the same way, is that we can choose our analysis area, rather than if Coburg did it and they drew a line around who could participate, then we wouldn't have any data from those driving in. There are other data products from the census that capture those kind of commuter flows, but this will get much more detailed data about, say, people coming in for a shopping trip or for school or for any other purposes. So we will have some of that data. I mean, some of those numbers might get kind of small, but yeah, it will be there. We're sampling throughout the state, not only within the urbanized areas. Thanks for the question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Van Gordon, you had your hand up and I see it's down now, or did you want to speak? Or
I just wanted to make a comment when they say, when they're talking about transforming the data, weighting the data, right? Like, it's just to sort of acknowledge that the art in this type of work is getting between the surveys and actually what we think it represents, and that there will be a little bit of work between. I don't know that we're going to see what actually was turned in. We're going to see it as a base, and then they're going to work on it and sort of transform it into something that's usable.
That's right. I mean, we will see both. We'll see the weighted and unweighted, but you're exactly right. There's a lot of work involved with getting from the raw data that as it's collected and then getting to the weighted representation. And like I said, only 80% or so will be from the randomized sample. And so there's also work to be done of how to weight those groups that we reached out to directly, sort of not, non-randomly, the transit university users. But we've got, that's the work we put in phases 1 and 2, going back and forth with with the consultants and making sure we've got a good plan for that. So thanks for noting that, though. It's very true. Final data set involves a lot of work plus the data collection.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, let's move on to 6B. We are falling a little behind schedule here, and we've got ODOT performance measures. Kelly, you're going to introduce this.
Yes. So at the October MPC meeting, MPC moved on our requirements as an MPO to act on federal performance measures, and those are related to system reliability and congestion mitigation and air quality. Again, MPC had moved to support the state's targets as we worked on with the state to develop them. So during that presentation, MPC had asked about additional measures that really weren't covered or really weren't addressed at the federal level, but mostly around like bridge resiliency and some other resiliency factors. And so we asked our ODOT friends to come and share some of the other state targets that they are actively measuring and reporting out on. And so Philip Case is here, as well as Bert Hartman. And I will start up my screen here to share. So Phil and Bert, if you just want to tell me when to advance slides, I will do so.
Sounds great. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As the slides get pulled up, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much for your time today. Myself and Bert are greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what ODOT measures as far as different types of performance measures, and a little bit about bridge resiliency. And so Bert will talk more about that in the back half of this presentation. I'm going to keep it rolling here. So next slide, please. Bottom line, these are the things we're here to talk about today. We have these legislatively approved key performance measures. It's been in place for quite a while. And Kelly alluded to that a little bit. We have federal performance measures. You know, we as a state have to report them. And we collaborate heavily with our MPOs partners around the state to make sure that we get to the right place for the targets on those particular performance measures. We'll talk a little bit about that. Then the back half will be an introduction to our bridge condition and seismic bridge program. And then finally, we'll briefly discuss our transparency website, because again, kind of to a point that was made earlier today, you know, we have to have transparency, and accountability and performance measures is a part of that. You know, when we think about performance measures, people think, oh, you know, data and numbers and, you know, that sort of thing and targets. But really, performance measures is storytelling. Ultimately, when I think of performance measures, I think of, you know, the story of when little Ian and his friends are riding their bikes to go to the Dairy Mart to get like a fruit flavored slushie, or maybe to the, swimming pool. Or, when grandma gets on the bus to go on LTD buses to go to her doctor's appointment. Our performance really ultimately applies to real life in these scenarios, right? Maybe Sydney gets to take the train to go see your sister Abby in Portland, and then back to Eugene again to go to work the next day. Or finally, when Kaylin gets home from work quickly and safely. These are all real world examples, because these are my kids. And so transportation is a real thing for everybody. If you live in the state of Oregon, if you travel to the state of Oregon, transportation matters, right? Whether it's jobs and different things like that. So performance measures is really ultimately that storytelling. And so that's why sometimes we like to, it's easy to get in the weeds and talk about, statistical analysis and things like that, but what impact are we really having on, folks around the state? And are we doing a good enough job working with our partners around the state to, get the best outcomes we can? So the next slide, please. So this is a constellation, if you will, of our different performance measures. Ultimately, ODOT has a strategic action plan, like a lot of organizations do. We have some certain metrics that measure those things and are guided by the strategic action plan, as are all of our performance measures. These metrics talk more about internal measures. Hey, as an agency, how are we doing? Are we doing what we need to do? We have a lot of programmatic measures, a ton of programmatic measures like most agencies do. We have our legislative key performance measures, and then we have our federal performance measures. So there's a ton of measures in the agency that tell our story, and there's data behind all these different measures. Some are more strategic in nature, like strategic action plan measures or metrics. Some are a little more programmatic, like, hey, what does this widget do, and how many do we have, and how quickly are we making them or fixing them, or how many potholes do we fill that week, or things like that. So there's a lot of different various levels, but the bottom line is they all tell a story. Some are bigger stories, some are smaller stories, but they all add up, right? So anyway, and why do we have all these different measures? First of all, the strategic action plan, like I said, those sets us progress towards achieving our internally focused strategic outcomes. Our legislative key performance measures, hey, are we making positive outcomes for the citizens of Oregon, right? I mean, ultimately, we all work for the taxpayer, right? I mean, and we pay taxes, so we want to get our money's worth too. So we all have a vested interest in doing this as best as we can. And then finally, the federal performance measures. Look, I love my federal partners, I really do, but these measures are more around their national level transportation goals, which don't always align with us as a state. And so we do report these things and work with our partners. But the bottom line is they all serve different purposes, and that's why they're not all exactly the same. So if you're asked about that, that's kind of where that comes from. And again, I'm going through this very quickly because I know we're kind of short on time. I don't want to get to what you guys really want to hear, and that is about some of the bridges and how that affects everybody. Okay, so next slide, please. Bottom line, the takeaway from this is the Oregon Transportation Commission, which you're all probably pretty familiar with, they were given a charge under House Bill 2017 to, hey, we got to develop these key performance measures and we need to report them. And there was a new committee that was formed, the Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee was formed to help do this. Now, we've been reporting measures since before 1988, so for forever. But what this did is it put that process into statute and brought some folks inside from the outside of ODOT to help us determine, hey, you know what? We may think this is important, but we hadn't thought about it that way, or we didn't report it that way, or we didn't even think about a measure this way. And so this, bringing in partners from outside the agency really helps us develop these legislative key performance measures. And again, those are the ones that really measure our performance towards seeking those outcomes that improve Oregonians and the traveling public's lives. Next slide, please. So you're like, hey, what are these key performance measures? Well, here they are. And again, I kind of listed them. I don't want to go through them or talk about them in detail because I'm not here to do that today. And that's all on our website, which we'll talk about here at the end. But the bottom line is, as you can see, they're pretty high level stuff. I mean, the strategies of loss of life or serious injury in our roadways. We want to know what that injury rate is. Disadvantage or DBE utilization, disadvantaged business enterprises. Look, if we select a business is traditionally disadvantaged, it has the ability to change its trajectory of that entire business and even that family's future, those families' future. So we recognize the fact that, taking advantage when it's right and it's a good fit to seek out different businesses that maybe traditionally have not been utilized, because again, it can make a positive impact in people's lives and literally change their future. DMV field office wait times. We're going to change that one. We're requesting the legislature to change that. Why do you want to do that? Well, DMV, okay, it's DMV. Well, if you didn't know, actually our approval rate at DMV is about 90%. So it's really pretty good despite, tradition. But field office wait times isn't applicable anymore. So what we try and do is to be flexible, because we're like, look, most of our DMV office wait times, you hear from your constituents and our partners around the state, hey, you know what, I can make an appointment and I know when I can go. So about 75 to 80% of our services are now by appointment. So that measure, although it's useful, about 90% is we're meeting less than 15-minute wait time. So now we're changing that to a service index. Construction on time and on budget. We're talking big money here, right? And obviously we need to get these projects done on time and on budget, because frankly, it's not just about a number on a page or a headline. Really, it's about, getting those pedestrian cross signaling and signage improved or installed if they're maybe not there. We're getting a bypass road open on time around the main street before school starts in the fall, right? I mean, we want to keep the kids and the semis away from each other. So it's important that we get these things done on time and on budget, because again, it's about keeping the funds there to do it. And we don't want to extend that as much as could happen. So we got to stay on top of that. Next slide, please. Again, here's more of our asset condition measures: bridge, pavement, public transit vehicle condition, and then some of our more transit measures. Again, the installation and use of multi-use paths near the busiest roads around the state, whether it's 82nd in Portland, or, you know, over in Cannon Beach or down in Florence, or even me, when I grew up off of River Road in Eugene. I used to, this is back in the day when River Road was nothing but 2 lanes, north and south, with some dirt paths. And maybe some of you around then, some of you probably were, but you might remember that it was backcountry roads out there back in the day. And that's what I used to ride about 3 miles to my friends who lived near their North Eugene High School. And then basically in high school, I took these multi-use paths down the Willamette River on the South Bank, across the Greenway Bridge, past the Valley River Mall to high school. And so, and then, you know, in high school during the summers, I would ride my bike down to the old Pepsi bottling plant, which used to be, you know, down near campus, obviously a little farther south now. But funny story was, I was on my bike, enjoying our multi-use paths that we have in Eugene and Springfield, which are awesome. And I'm on a bike, okay, I'm in a high school. And I get just passed like super fast by this female runner. I'm like, what is going on here? And she was just smoking me. So I looked over and I talked to my folks, said, hey, you know, I got, and they said, you know what? That's Mary Decker Slaney. All right, look, that's Tracktown USA on full display on that bike path. All right, even back when I was a young punk like me, that is what Eugene and Springfield is known for, is for being friendly to all users of the transportation system, even back then. And so it's important, particularly with, oh, by the way, wonderful job this last summer, okay? Eugene Springfield was on display, and how you guys handled all the influx of traffic and everything else going on like that, you probably have heard this time and again. But as a representative of ODOT, I will say we appreciate the work that was done, you know, sometimes years in advance to get ready for that. So thank you for making that happen, because you really made, you know, Eugene, Springfield, and the state of Oregon look great. So thank you again for making that successful. But again, we all have experiences with transportation. That's just a couple of my stories with it. And that's really what transportation performance reporting is all about. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is a list of our legislative key performance measures. Okay, great. Key performance measures. We got like 27 of them back when I showed up at ODOT. You have 27, none of them are key, right? And so we did, we said, hey, you know what, we need to kind of trim these down a little bit to what, you know, what's more important at the strategic level. Of course, look, if it's strategic, it takes time to see those results and trends. And so that, you know, we have to work with our partners and say, hey, you know, it's going to take time to see some changes in some of these performance measures. Programmatic's great because you see it pretty quick, but then there's a lot of fluctuation and noise, right? And so the bottom line is, wanted to focus those down and reflect, you know, at the highest level, you know, what's important to our role as an transportation agency in serving our Oregonians. One that I'll highlight, and you'll see the ones that are darker, the changes that we had along the way, and the pedestrian and bicycle facilities index, okay? Look, the way it's currently measured is, hey, how many of our urban state highway miles have bike lanes and sidewalks that are in fair or better condition? You know, we could pave bike walks next to all these busy roads and take care of that, right? We want to keep the heavy traffic away from our vulnerable users, right? And so what we decided to do is say, hey, work with our partners around the state and said, hey, you know, what's a better way to measure utilization or index our facilities, right? You got to have it. You can have a bike path, but if it's 3 miles before the bus stop, I mean, how many people are going to really use it? I'm not going to send my kid out there to ride down a busy road without any sort of, you know, safety features. And so let's build out those facilities, and therefore we can bump up utilization as an example. So we said, hey, you know, target crossing spacing, as well as the condition of the assets, this is important. So we're changing the way we measure things in response to users of the system, right? And we talked a little bit about that earlier. Hey, you know what? There are a lot of users of the system, but we need to make sure that they're safe and they want to use it. And that's where we use some of that survey data that we talked about just a minute ago. Is, hey, do you use it? Do you feel safe using it? And there's different ways to measure that. I don't want to get into the weeds, but the bottom line, that's important information that we can take back and improve people's transportation experience, right? And I talked already about DMV, the DMV change a little bit. Okay, next slide. The takeaway from this is it takes years to develop a legislative key performance measure, you know, up to 2.5 years to make a change. So they're slow. You know, they are approved by the Oregon legislature. and through our Oregon Transportation Commission and different ways. But the bottom line is we want to make sure that what we do reflects what the needs of Oregonians are. And so that does take time. Again, this is your bureaucratic red tape slide is what this is. But it does exist because everybody's got to have a voice, right? And when you have everyone have a voice and you listen, it's not efficient. You know, a good example is, you know, if Apple wants to make a phone that doesn't serve a particular group of people, they can. That's their choice as a business. As a state agency and as a government agency, we have a statutory requirement to serve everybody's needs, right? And we need to hear everybody's voices. A business can choose not to do that. So again, there's some inefficiencies built into the system. However, ultimately, we want to see those positive outcomes as quickly and efficiently as we can. Next slide. And again, I apologize, I'm going through this pretty quick, but I'm trying to get to the back half of the presentation so we can talk a little bit about bridges. It was briefly mentioned the federal performance measures. These are some of them. I'm going to go through a couple more slides. These are the safety ones. We report these every year. We work with our partners around the state with our highway safety plan and highway safety improvement plans. And we report, these are just a small subset of all the measures that we report. But as you can see, the highlight is fatalities and serious injuries. And then non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, like, you know, skateboards, all the people maybe using scooters and things like that. How are they getting injured? We need to be aware of that, especially as more and more of those users come out and use those and take advantage of those opportunities. We need to make sure we're on the ball with that. Okay, next slide. Okay, asset condition, bridges, pavement, interstate, non-interstate, national highway system. I know that's a mouthful, but we all know what the interstates are. We all know what the national highway system pavements are, like Highway 20 or 22 and different ones like that, or 26, 97. So anyway, those are, we got to know what those are. And then of course, the bridge conditions, national highway system bridges by deck area. Bert's going to talk a little bit about this and why this is not a great measure. And the fact of the matter is these are federal performance measures, the lowest common denominator measures. And why do we want to use these for policymaking decisions? Because we don't, because they're not very good, but there's something every state can report on. And so that's why we report it. And again, it's the national transportation, not what we as Oregonians necessarily like to use to make policy decisions. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is a little bit about the system performance. Hey, reliability, person miles traveled on the interstate. Talk about a traffic engineer's, you know, measure. Bottom line is, this is related to congestion. Freight movement is again related to congestion, travel truck time. Then we have the traffic congestion, peak hour delay, single occupancy vehicle, on-road mobile emissions, on our congestion mitigation, air quality. And then finally, you may have heard there's a greenhouse gas emissions. It came and then it went and now it's back again. And so I suspect that this will be another federal performance measure. Obviously, as a state agency with our partners around the state, we are focusing on this quite a bit these days and recognize, hey, this is something that we need to, you can't make any changes unless you measure it. You got to know what the data is, right? It's hard to make changes if you don't. So, you know, we'll continue with that. So that's out there right now. We'll see where that goes. Next slide, please. And again, target setting theory is use the data. Aspirational targets are great. We have to use data to set the targets. And that's why, that's how we as an agency, generally, we like aspirational targets, but when we're reporting these, we can't just say, hey, you know, we're gonna have 0 fatalities by 2035. Yeah, that sounds great. That's not what the data is telling us. The data is telling us it's this. So we always want to bend that curve south, you know, on fatalities and serious injuries, for example. We're always trying to get to that 0 fatalities. We also have to set realistic targets based on the data. And so that's kind of what drives our target setting. And we report it every couple of years, a baseline, and then a full performance period every 4 years. Next slide. And here's the timeline for the feds. Again, it's a 4-year cycle, working with our MPO partners around the state, because they either have to agree to support our state targets, which in this case Clampo has, or they have to declare their own. There's a lot of discussion back and forth about the advantages and disadvantages of that. But the bottom line is we are held accountable for our performance. And we have to report that to the feds, and the MPOs, if they choose their own, have to report it to us. Okay, next slide. sorry about the eye chart. Bottom line, these are the next targets for the federal performance measures for 2022 through 2025. I don't want to go into it too much other than say that they exist, and we work with our partners around the state. Central Lane NPO, you know, we talked a little bit about that, our excessive hour delay and single occupancy vehicle travel delay as well. All right, next slide. All right, now the fun part. I get to introduce Bert, and he gets to do all the talking. And then at the end, we'll be happy to field any questions you have. So Bert, please take it away.
Just that, Bert, this is all important information, but we need to move through this. This is a 20-minute agenda item, and we're into it 25 minutes already. Thank you.
Okay, I'll move through it really quick. We do a condition report every year. Next, we have a interactive condition report. It's online. You can drill in deeper. Next, you can drill in and filter on bridges. I've looked at got a couple bridges here. Ross Island, St. John's, you can get the conditions, you can get the seismic status. It's all on our website. Sean, you got a question?
I'm going to defer to the chair here because I have a comment. If he wants to keep going, then until we end and save it, I can do that, Randy.
Mayor, do you mind if we just wait to the end and
Yep,
we'll
that's
try
fine.
and bang through those? Thank you.
Okay, next. Also on the website, we've got our seismic plan. The blue routes, those are the most important ones, are phase 1. We've got US 97 done. We've got the bid on 58. It hasn't been awarded yet. And then we'll be working on I-5 and I-84 next. And we got a seismic advisory committee to help prioritize that work. Okay, this is a great slide just to look at just for a sec. This is our demographic of our bridges, and I sure would have liked to have it just be like a straight line, but it's not. We've got this massive group of interstate area bridges that are 60 or 70 years old. They're just continuing to age, and bridges are kind of like people. As they get older, they'll need more attention. And you'll see that if you want to have a good bridge, you basically buy a new one. Next. Here's how we rate bridges. They're rated every 2 years. The inspectors rate the deck, superstructure, substructure. Most bridges are in somewhere from good to poor condition. Very few are in a very good or very poor condition. Next. This is a zoomed in look at condition reporting, and basically just shows we're managing the decline of the system. It's slowly deteriorating. Next. Basically, slide shows the same thing. We're doing well with poor bridges, very small percentage, but our good bridges are going down. Fair bridges are increasing. Really concerned about the fair bridges that are eventually going to be spilling into the poor category. Next. Let's just skip this slide. This is National Highway System. You'll see at the interstates, some major highways. Many ODOT highways are not NHS. And of course, there's local NHS also. Next. Okay, this is from our 2021 report, and this is just ODOT bridges. For 2022, for all bridges, we're looking at 12.4 in good condition, 86.5 in fair, 1.1 in poor. So again, our fair population is very increased, and we're doing good on the poor. So next. Okay, Eugene, Springfield, this is a bit difficult graph to look at, but the blue is fair. So you've got 95% of your bridges in fair condition. Good is 5% and poor is 0. So you're doing great when it comes to no poor bridges. But again, almost all your bridges are in fair condition. Next. This is a good one too. Oregon compared to the Western states. A lot of states are doing good with poor bridges, a small number. Look, Oregon has less good bridges than any other state, and it's significantly less than states like Arizona and California, and even Washington. Next. This is our key performance measure. It's got bridges in poor condition, and then in the right-hand side, it's got things we work on like vertical clearance, bridges washing out due to flood events, and also just preserving bridges like painting and things like that. So next. Here's our key performance measure. That's as of last year. We're on a, again, this is really zoomed in, but we've showed decline for like 5 years in a row. We've declined by 1% this year. So this year, we're below our target. Next. And here's why. Load rating, we've got two new classes of vehicles. We've got the single unit trucks, which is the diagram shown above, like a concrete truck with drop axles, 62,000 pounds. You can take that exact weight and put that on a fire truck. Really concentrated loads, and the bridges were never designed for these loads. So we've a lot of load posting letters have been going out in the last year, and that's why our performance measures decreased. Next. We've also got issues with winter maintenance. This is northbound, the Beltline. It was built in 2008. It's heavily used, 15,000 vehicles, but look at the geometry on that. It's got a high application rate of de-icing chemicals. It was suggested we do an overlay for $17.8 million. This bridge isn't that old, and that's a lot of money to put into it. I've got some chloride cores going to be taken. We're going to figure out the best treatment in the future, but if we have to close it and do a structural overlay, that'll be a tough call, but we need to be able to afford to maintain these bridges. But the winter salt chemicals, it's not good, and we'll be paying for it. Next. Okay, local bridge program, the 24-27 STIP. You've got the strengthening project on the Ferry Street Viaduct. There's your posting sign, and that's a single unit vehicle, and there's a concrete truck, which is pretty typical of these single unit vehicles, really concentrate the loads. Next. The IIJA really focused on off-system bridges. These are bridges on urban local, rural minor collector. Those are based on federal functional class. We looked at the needs of those bridges. For local is about 25%, but based on the federal funding requirements, we had to spend 43% of our local bridge money on these minor bridges. So that takes away from our ability to work on the major bridges or the on-system bridges, but that's the way it is. Next. That completes my presentation.
Thank you very much, both Phil and Paul and Bert. And we're now open for questions, comments from MPC. Mayor Van Gordon.
I just have a quick comment. Look, guys, there's a lot here, and I'm going to tell you two things, especially with the data that's coming out of ODOT right now. We really need help sort of boiling this up and making it a lot simpler and making it, user friendly. I'm a data guy, and I was lost through part of it. And we're effectively what you're doing is you're sort of losing the story and the sort of tactical sausage making that you would have, that you would care for an internal business presentation. And really, I'm sitting here wondering, going, okay, the charts are cool, but what do I do with it? How do I aggregate it? How do I actually make policy about it? I mean, it's cool stuff that you guys are working on it, but we need it about 5 levels higher. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. The other piece that I would think about the continuous improvement piece, and this is the thing that ODOT's got to get a ton more flexible here. It cannot take you guys 2 years to put into another performance measure. I don't know what you guys do with it, but I'm looking at that chart and going, one of the ODOT's challenges and headwinds is it's a giant bureaucracy and it doesn't move with how Oregon works, right? So finding a way to sort of make some of this sort of simplified and be a little bit more responsive with key performance metrics. Nobody in the private sector could deal with taking 2 years to develop a metric. It's just not practical. I've got lots of other opinions, but I know we're like 25 minutes over.
Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon.
Thank you, sir. The point I was making about the 2 years to do key performance measure is that 78 state agencies, boards and commissions are required by state law to report those key performance measures. And that is the process that is set up by our state legislators and the governor's office. So
right,
as much as we try and push back.
But I don't see you guys say in any of those slides, say, we need help with that, or say that, hey, we need to be more responsive here. It's just the bureaucracy causes us to do it a certain way. And I'm like, okay, 78 agencies, 85 agencies, right? It doesn't matter, but the government's got to be more responsive to what the public needs here. And like, that's the message that I was expecting to see in the slide, to say, hey, we started this in 2017. And then we figured out that it's too cumbersome and we've got to do X, Y, and Z to go back out and fix it, because ultimately we're all accountable for the results.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Board Member Norden.
Yeah, actually, it's somewhat with a segue of what Mayor Von Gordon was just talking about, the timeline it takes to do anything. And I looked at the chart with the legislative priorities, and then, you know, the bureaucratic chart of just how long it takes to get everything done. And I'm realizing that nowhere in that whole presentation was anything about autonomous vehicles. And this is something that's coming down the line. It's something that's happening now in our society, and yet we have to get it into the pipeline. You know, there has to be a discussion. I'm sure there are offices at ODOT that people are working on this daily, but, you know, we have to get the regulations written first. So that has to address the legislature to actually write the regulations, and then go through the whole process of, you know, involving democracy and getting it possible so that we can more actively use our autonomous vehicle assets that are, they're present now. They're being used in many communities around the world at the moment, but Oregon is lacking the regulations and the techniques just to proceed with this. That's my comment.
Yes, sir, you are correct. We have offices inside ODOT that work with partners around the state, commercial partners, other states, consortiums, to figure out, hey, where's this going? What's going to happen? You are correct. This is like going from the horse and buggy to powered automobiles. It's going to be something like that. And in the meantime, it's going to be messy, because when two autonomous vehicles crash, who's responsible? You know, to answer some of these questions, and liability is an issue too. So you're right. This is an ongoing process, and we do have folks in place at ODOT that I'm sure, if you're interested, I'll talk to Paul and Kelly. We can get those folks to come and talk to you about the great work that they're doing.
Thank you both. I appreciate the presentation. One thing I did want to comment on is regarding the bridge comparisons to other states. While I don't know what is a direct comparison and what is not, I would expect Arizona to be way ahead of us because of the massive growth that they've experienced in the 21st century, and the fact that so many of their bridges are brand new, and their highway surfaces or freeway surfaces are virtually all concrete, and they don't have the freeze-thaw cycle that we have in the Northwest. So just a personal observation. And with that, Vidal.
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I got a question. It's for Bert Hartman. You talked about the bridge, the Beltline flyover there, about the deck surfaces and so forth, about the chemicals that are being thrown on there. Have we looked at any alternative options on maintenance, from a maintenance perspective, as far as what we can use on the deck to lessen the deterioration?
You know, ODOT has really just really expanded the use of winter chemicals so people can drive like it's in the summertime in the middle of winter. And as long as that expectation's there, from a safety perspective, that's what we're paying for in the infrastructure. It's a chemical dependence issue. It's going to take some tough love.
Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
First, I want to say I didn't appreciate the remark about when bridges get old, they need more help, just like when people get old, because it was true.
I got hair right here. Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'm as gray as you are.
Anyway, I want to echo the point Mayor Van Gordon made about speed and presentation, so we're not involved in sausage making. We're involved in policy levels that are accountable to the public. And there was another point. Oh, and I also wanted to echo the chair's point when he talked about Arizona bridges versus Oregon bridges. Data does not speak for itself. It has to be interpreted. And we need this data moving forward to be interpreted in ways where we can make real comparisons, not just say these guys aren't doing as good as us, but we're not doing as good as them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions to come before this agenda item? Seeing none, we are going to move on to 6C, Letter of Support for City of Eugene Application Grant. Paul, I see you're going to introduce it with, I'm assuming, Rob Innerfield doing the presentation.
Chair, yes, that's exactly true. And I'm going to just go ahead and pass it off to Rob. I believe he's here. And again, in your packet was a draft letter of support that I received just last week for MPC to consider its support.
Good afternoon. I'm Rob Innerfeld, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Eugene. I think is Jennifer Willer here because I think she was also going to be helping me with presenting this information. There's an opportunity with the new federal infrastructure bill. As I think most of you are aware, there's a lot of new grant opportunities, and some of these are more in the emergency management and resiliency category. And so in particular, there's structures in our Roosevelt Yard that are not able to withstand a subduction zone earthquake. In particular, our fleet building is in poor condition. And so one of the grants would be to do planning work to determine what kind of facility we need out there in the Roosevelt Yard. But obviously, like if we have a big emergency in our area, we need to be able to service our emergency vehicles. And that's the purpose of our fleet facility out at the Roosevelt Yard. And then our West 11th Avenue Bridge over Amazon Creek is subject both to potential flood risk from the from Amazon Creek, but also it's a bridge that's not seismically sound. And in addition to that, the bike path that goes underneath the bridge, it was lowered when the MX was installed on the bridge. And so the path is subject to regular flooding. So this grant would help to fund replacement of the bridge to make it both resilient to flooding, to seismic events, and also enable us to raise the shared use path to avoid flooding. So Jennifer, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Rob. Jennifer Willer, City of Eugene. I'm a city engineer. I don't have anything to add, but I'm here available to answer any questions that people have.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions?
I guess I'll just say we greatly appreciate a letter of support from the MPC. So obviously that's why we're here today. So
is there a motion for approval? Oh, excuse me, back up, Commissioner Buck.
I just want to make a comment here. Lane County was interested in, applying for some of this money, but for landslides, but it didn't work out. So there's no conflict, and I certainly support the effort.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any opposition? I'm not seeing any. I'm assuming that means unanimous approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I also appreciate the brevity there. We are moving on to item 6D, ODOT Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality CMAQ grant program. Let's see, Vidal, you're the lead for this?
Yes, I'll be taking this on. I do believe Paul's going to help me out by putting the slides on the screen there for me.
I am, and I'll do that in just a moment. I also want to just remind the committee that this arose from several months ago when you approved a letter of support for a private company that was applying for ODOT's congestion mitigation and air quality funds through a grant, and you requested more information on that program. So this is follow up from that, and I'll share the screen now.
Thank you for that introduction, Paul. I appreciate that. I was going to kind of say the same thing there. Again, this presentation here, basically, this is going to be a short overview, if you will, of the entire program. And I understand that some of you are aware of the program, but again, if I repeat some stuff or what's not, please forgive me there, but I'll try to make it as brief as possible, but at the same time, cover those key points. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so first I would like to actually introduce to everyone Hope Dickerson. I believe Hope is on the line with us right now. And are you there, Hope?
I am. Oh, hi. Yes, I'm here. It's Hope Derrickson, actually.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It happens often.
So one of the things I do want to stress too, she's the federal and state funding program manager for the CMAQ funds. And earlier we talked about black boxes and so forth. I'm putting you on the spot there, Hope. Hope actually works in the black box for this funding program. Okay. The things I'm going to cover with this, just 3 main points: an overview of the CMAQ program. We're going to talk a little bit about the engagement of MPOs and rural towns. And I want to remind you again, the same thing that Paul mentioned earlier. Back in August of this year, we did have a letter of support that was provided to us, and this body made support of that letter. And I believe the company's name was actually Gary Compton Construction LLC. And at least at the time, we were understanding that it was coming from out of Oak Ridge. And what they wanted to do was, there were 2 old, I guess, 2 diesel engine or 2 diesel vehicles that they wanted to get either retrofitted or replaced or upgraded through this program. And then we'll just take on any questions that you may have. Again, myself and Hope, and I will say, Hope too, at any time you feel you need to jump in there, feel free to kind of chime in. You're more than welcome to do so. As an overview, again, the CMAQ is a federally funded program for surface transportation improvements directed to improve air quality and mitigate congestion. These CMAQ funds are apportioned annually to each state, and according to the severity of the air quality problems that they may be having. And this is administered both by FHWA and the Federal Transit Administration. Next slide, please. So there's 2 things that 2 facets to this program, or let's just, did we go to the next slide? Oh, yes, we did. I'm sorry. Paul, I'm running two slides here, yours, and then I have another one up as well. There's 2 facets to this program. There's both the MPO side as well as the rural town side of it as well. And so on the MPO side of this, again, when this program rolls out through the MPO, they kind of call for their projects. And I would say, Paul, it would literally be Paul and company kind of asking for projects to see what projects that are out there that would qualify for this program itself. And again, the MPO would make their own little process, if you will, and determine which ones of these projects that's been submitted to them that would qualify for this. And they would actually make all the decisions that they would need regarding the prioritization of those projects that come to them. And then they would just ensure that whatever's submitted to them is within any parameters that the program overall may have in terms of eligibility. Now, the second facet to this program deals with the rural participants. And as you can see in the slide there in the middle there, you've got your MPOs, Portland, Salem, and Central Lane, but then you also have rural participants, which are these various towns, Klamath Falls, LaGrange, Lakeview, and then the one that's closest to us, which is Oak Ridge. And if you remember, at least from what I remember, the company, the construction company, it appears that they were submitting this through or via as a result of the Oak Ridge portion. So we do have a region contact who would identify each eligible project for CMAQ funding. And again, the MPOs themselves kind of manage and reach out or call for projects, but then the rural entities, if they will, these rural entities actually reach out to the region contact for CMAQ fundings in terms of their request or their needs. Next slide, please. As from a high level perspective, there are 5 main aspects, or let's just say eligibility requirements for this CMAQ funding program. And then there's also a narrowed list of eligible projects. And first I'm going to cover just the 5 main aspects that all the projects need to kind of fall into. First, it must be a transportation project. It must generate a net emissions reduction. And then it must be located in or benefit a non-attainment or maintenance area. It must conform to the Clean Air Act, and it must be consistent with long-range transportation, with a long-range transportation plan, which includes, again, the MTIP, which would be included in the MTIP for the different various MPOs, and it also be incorporated into the STIP for when we talk about the rural communities. And the thing I'm going to touch back on to is line item number 3 there, where it says must be located in or benefit a non-attainment or maintenance area. I'm going to touch back on that just a little bit, maybe 2 slides up, so that we can all understand what that exactly means. Next slide, please. So this next slide, in addition to the 5 eligible criteria that was presented to us, this next slide talks about the narrowed list of eligibility, if you will. And again, you can kind of see there's about 7 categories in there. Public transportation improvement. This deals with capital projects, capital purchases, operational improvements. There's transportation option strategies, which is number 2. Again, that's working with maybe a geographic specific congestion issue that you're trying to handle. We also see there's a safe routes to school outreach or engagement programs. This is when we're trying to encourage our students to either walk more or bike more in terms of whatever project or interest that we have, as far as encouraging them to do things of that nature. Also, you can also tell there's when you were encouraging people or to do more van pool or rideshare options, if you will. Number 3 down there is pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. And I know that's pretty huge here in Eugene. Myself being a avid bike rider, this program here is something that I sometimes lean to us, or at least reach out to see if a project here or a project there could possibly use some of this funding. Number 4 there, of which I highlighted, is the vehicle fuel efficiency efforts. This deals more with the top line says diesel engine retrofits, which, if you remember, the construction company that submitted to us for this letter of support actually was trying to retrofit their engines. So this actually, the need to retrofit their engines falls under line item number 4, but at the same time, it specifically requires for school buses, government fleet vehicles, and so forth. So this doesn't really lend itself to private entities, of which Gary Construction or Gary Compton Construction LLC was trying to attain. But the CMAQ program itself is more designed, or is more for public entities, whether that be even cities, municipalities, and so forth. And then line item number 5, intelligent transportation systems. And then 6 and 7, relieving congestion or reducing congestion. And then number 7 is for trying to improve the air quality in terms of if you got gravel streets and so forth, and you need to pave those. We're mitigating the dust, if you will, or particulates that be floating in the air. Next slide, please. So this next slide here deals with the explanation of line item number 3 of the 5 main eligible requirements that I wanted to at least bring to your attention. And this is how Oak Ridge actually falls into this as far as being identified as an actual location that would qualify for this type of funding. And non-attainment generally means that this geographical area has not consistently met clean air levels set by EPA in terms of its ambient air quality standards, okay? And I would understand that these rural communities, this is some of the locations, this is some of the reasons why they are actually listed in there because of the air quality within that particular location. Next slide, please. So, and again, we do have an award process, and we also have an agreement process. The award process, again, the MPOs would actually provide those applications to ODOT along with any documentation that they may have, in particular emissions calculations, et cetera. And then we would review that, and then the ODOT program manager, which typically is Hope, she would reach out to the MPOs and have that conversation with them. And then the MPOs would actually put that project into the MTIP, and accordingly, those projects would be incorporated into the STIP as well. And then obviously for the agreement process, that typically deals with both the rural participants who would begin working on their agreement process once the project has been identified and it's been accepted. And then to move forward, ODOT would actually reach out to FHWA for approval and to obligate those CMAQ funds. Next slide, please. So this next slide is basically what I wanted to talk a little bit about is the engagement of the MPOs and engagement of the rural towns. And Hope, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you reach out to the MPOs?
So I think generally speaking, actually we're late on sending out the 2023 allocations for CMAQ funds for the MPOs. I've got a little bit more work to do, and then I believe either Alice or Jeff Alice Bidler or Jeff Flowers will be sending out that official notification that allocates the federal dollars to the individual MPOs. So that'll be forthcoming. And then the rural entities, they're on an every 3-year rotation. So this year, actually Lakeview is on tap to get their allocation. And then next year, Oak Ridge will get theirs. So for any engagements related to the rural communities or entities, I would just reach out to, whoever their person is and let them know that they've, banked some money this year. Let them know if they've been potentially, because the rural communities get such a limited amount, they usually do sort of bank 2 or 3 or 4 years to kind of get enough money to do, pave something or buy a street sweeper or whatever they've got going. And so I'll reach out to them and say, here's your new set of money plus any money that you've had in the past that we've kind of just been holding on to, and let them know what that dollar value is so that they can, decide how they want to spend that money.
All right.
Does that help?
Oh, that's awesome. Hope I appreciate that.
Sure.
And so you can see that really the engagement, and that's part of this conversation here. One of the questions that was asked back in August was, hey, Vidal, what do we do as far as outreach for those? And I'm mainly speaking in part for those private entities. Those private entities that are actually trying to apply for some CMAQ funds so that they can get their paperwork submitted in and such so that they know that this type of funding is actually out there. So in reality, the CMAQ portion of it, as far as the agency is concerned, is really geared towards public agencies that can apply and get that type of funding as a result of being, eligible, falling under that eligible criteria. But I don't want to just leave us hanging like this. Can we go to the next slide too? And hopefully the next slide will help bring things full circle. First on our right, DEQ does have a funding program that does deal directly with emissions mitigation, if you will. It's particularly with diesel engines. And again, it says in here that DEQ provides about $8 million in grant funding to reduce Oregon's diesel emissions. So, and the goal obviously is to try to get emissions down to the best way we can. If you look at the eligibility part of this both public and private and tribal entities could actually apply for this funding so that they can go ahead and get some money to either retrofit their diesel engines or try to do some sort of upgrade that would be qualified under this DEQ program. And I'm going to stress this is a DEQ program itself. And to the left of your screen there, you can see the date on there, August 19, 2022. That's when they actually announced who all were recipients of that particular funding that was given out there. And I've got on the bottom of the slides there, the actual web addresses are there. You can actually go in there and look it up and pull up the exact article, and you can actually see who all was given the actual funding itself. And I believe out of that group, there was about maybe 7 to about 9 individuals or entities. And in those different entities, about 3 or 2 were actual private entities that received that funding. But one other thing that I do want to say to kind of mix things up a little bit, please understand that the CMAQ portion that ODOT funds or that ODOT manages is directly managed under the Oregon Department of Transportation. The one here on the right, the Diesel Emissions Mitigation Fund, is actually managed directly under DEQ, which is a different state agency. And it turns out that the construction company was actually applying for the Diesel Emissions Mitigation Fund and not necessarily for the CMAQ funds that was given, or that's part of the ODOT portion, or let's just say the program that ODOT actually manages itself. I don't know if I should say this, but, and Hope, correct me if I'm wrong here. It turns out that in reality, when we receive funding from the feds as part of CMAQ, or if you will, there is a top line of funds from that funding that we actually push over to DEQ that they use as part of this program that they have to help come up with the dollars that they need so that they can manage their program, which is this Diesel Emissions Mitigation Fund. And again, I want to separate the two so that we don't get confused here. The Diesel Emissions Mitigation Fund is actually managed by DEQ and ran by DEQ, and they have their own criteria and qualifications and so forth. But the CMAQ is actually managed by ODOT, which doesn't have that private portion into it. And next slide. Questions. I hope that was clear enough and high level enough so that we all could understand here.
Are there questions from the MPC? And if we could return to our regular screen so we can see. Board Member Norden.
Yes, just in that last presentation, I was noticing, well, you got the CMAQ program to help with changing new engines. Is there any discussion or part of the program that addresses getting more friendly fuels available, like the R99 fuel that LTD uses, rather than, you know, diesel 2 or diesel 5 that are much more polluting?
Very good question. Go ahead. Go ahead, Hope.
I was going to say, I don't know at the moment. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I would just add in the for line item number 5 for the narrowed eligibility eligible projects. There is it also refers to compressed natural gas or CNG or recycled natural gas, and as fueling stations and infrastructure. So again, I think that it's going to be limited, but again, I believe natural gas or compressed natural gas more than will likely fall under this category as far as lessening the emissions as well.
Thank you. Are there any more questions to come on this agenda item? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on to our last agenda item, 6E, follow-up and next steps. Is there an ODOT report or ODOT update?
As far as the ODOT update is concerned, I just got one item I want to touch up on really brief, and I think I've said this probably before, but I'll go ahead and say it again. The 24-27 draft STIP is going out for comment in January. I would say early January. At least the last date that I've got is January 12th of 2023. It will be going out for public comment. I'm trying to spread the news out as much as possible, as early as possible, so that everyone here or elsewhere could be prepared to participate in providing some comments on that draft STIP once it comes out.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other items to come before the MPC from members? I'm not seeing any, but as chair, I would like to recognize that we have 3 members of our happy band here that are leaving us, and this is their last meeting. We have Lane County Commissioner Joe Burney. Joe, thank you very much for your service and all you've brought, including levity at times. And I know you've served also as a board chair. Thank you very much. We also have LTD board members, board chair Caitlin Vargas and board member Don Norden. Likewise, thank you for your time and your service. This is a commitment for people. These are all volunteer positions, and we thank you very much. And with that, is there anything else to come before the MPC? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.